Greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our 2021 Martin Luther King Day program. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our local Martin Luther King Day Planning Committee based here in Yellow Springs, Ohio. The theme for today's program is Do Something, from the sidelines to the front lines. Do something from the sidelines to the front lines. And that theme emerged from a discussion that although Dr. King was known for some of the glorious and wonderful speeches that he gave, that his life stood for much more than his iconic I Have a Dream speech. He was, in fact, more importantly than being an excellent orator, a strategist and an organizer. The Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, both came about as a result of his organizing. So we want to remember that, and especially considering the challenges that our democracy faces here in the near future, or, to this very day, actually. So I'm going to pause right here for a moment and ask you to get a pen and paper because I'll be asking you to take a action step, a very important action step, in a couple of minutes. Okay, our program today consists of, we have a drumming invocation coming up, led by Brother G, we call him, John F. Jamera, with the Freedom, Peace, and Justice drummers. Following that, we will have a special address from Ms. Shadia Alvarez, a friend of mine and a longtime community organizer. And also we will have some local poets, some young people I had the pleasure and privilege of hearing in our recent Kwanzaa celebration. We will also have some selections from the wonderful World House Choir, led by the meticulous and excellent Dr. Kathy Roma, and they've been participating in our program for a number of years now, and they also participate in programs all over this general area. We will also have the presentation of our annual Community Peacemaker Award, which is something we started just a few years ago. So welcome in joining us. And here is the action step that I've just taken upon myself. Nobody asked me to do this, but considering the state of the challenges to our voting rights in particular, what we're facing is similar to the backlash from Reconstruction in the 1870s, the attack on our voting rights. There have been literally somewhere near 400 voter suppression bills in over 30 states submitted in this past year or so. So as we push back against disenfranchising, particularly black and progressive voters, I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask you to think about what the state of our society is going to be like if those bills in these number of states are allowed to stand, the implication of our losing our voting rights. I'm just going to pause for a few seconds and ask for you to think about that. So in the spirit of the theme of the program, do something from the sidelines to the front lines, I would like to ask people to get involved with applying pressure to two people who are holding up the process of pushing through the Voting Rights Act bill, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act bill. So I have the phone numbers for Senator Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, and I'm going to ask you to call these people and demand that they do what's necessary to push the Voting Rights Act through so that we can eliminate, nullify these hundreds of voter suppression acts in all these states across the country. So please take these following numbers down. For Joe Manchin, his number, his Washington, D.C. office number is 202-224-3954. That's 202-224-3954. The number for Senator Sinema, S-I-N-E-M-A, is 202-224-4521. That's 202-224-4521. Please call these people and call them daily and often. Look up their numbers for the offices in their station. Manchin has 3 other offices in West Virginia that you could call, and Sinema has 2 other offices that you could call. So let's get busy, call these people, and apply the pressure, because I, for one, do not want to live in a society where my vote, our votes, are being suppressed. So I'm going to thank you in advance for that action, and if I could, I'd follow up and make sure that you did it. But of course, I won't be able to do this, but this is extremely important, and we always, in our committee, are trying to come up with ideas to inspire people to take some action. So once again, I'm going to thank you in advance for following through with that. And now we will have our drumming invocation with Brother G. Thank you once again for being here.
In honor of Martin Luther King, on the anniversary of his birthday, this is for him, for raising up humanist principles and value in an age and a time that the world needed it. This piece is called Odunde, which means Happy New Year. May we all have a Happy New Year in doing right by humanity.
Okay, so next up will be a message from a good friend of mine, Shadia Alvarez. Shadia is an Antioch grad. She was born in Puerto Rico, grew up in the Dominican Republic, and New York City. Came here and attended Antioch, became a community government manager, became involved with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which was a program born out of the organization Human, Help Us Make a Nation, which was founded by Bill Chappelle and Jim Dunn, who's kind of infamous in this area. Shadia became one of the trainers and remains trainer today. The People's Institute for Survival and Beyond has been doing anti-racism workshops all over this country for over 40 years now. And Shadia has participated in a good number of those. So we are happy to have her here. She's back at Antioch, as one of her roles is, I know she has several, but one of them is she's the executive director of the Coretta Scott King Center. So we're looking for her to make that space available and functional for organizing programs in the community. And her vitae is quite lengthy, so I won't share all of it, but it's quite impressive. You know, she's an impressive and passionate educator, committed to impacting young people educationally, socially. So we are really fortunate, you know, to have her in our midst. She's also been involved with the Board of Trustees for many, many years. So without any more from me, please welcome Shadia Alvarez.
Do something, from the sidelines to the front lines. First and foremost, we want to acknowledge that our words today are connected to the threads of the past and hold both the tensions of our history and the possibility of a humanity that is whole and complete for our future generations. We acknowledge the indigenous people of our First Nations. We acknowledge the caretakers of the land and those stolen from their homes and exploited for their labor. We acknowledge that from toil came triumph and that from resilience comes brilliance. We thank all of those seen and unseen who make it possible for us to be here today. We are grateful to the land and the water, to the birds that sing us new songs, to the sun for its warmth, and to the moon that provides us rest. We are thankful to our elders for their wisdom and patience, and to the new, younger generations for their wit and their fire. We see you, we thank you, we acknowledge you. Today, as we observe the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, we remind ourselves of the urgency in fighting for voting rights in this nation and for human rights in this world. We uplift the legacy of Dr. Bernice King, the King Center, and the King family in Atlanta. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Shadia Alvarez. I am Executive Director of the Coretta Scott King Center at Antioch College and Vice President for Equity and Strategic Development. I am the child of a movement for social justice and human rights in this nation, and I come to you as an Afro-Latina mother, a daughter, and the child of immigrants from Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. I humbly accept that I was placed on this earth to be a community organizer, to connect, to bring folks together, to learn, to share, with the intention and purpose of being a contribution to humanity. Saying those words seems easy, but it is in fact complicated, messy. Our life experiences do not read as a neatly coordinated mission statement or a colorful Post-it note. But sharing is necessary and essential if we are to honor Dr. King's legacy and if we are to stay focused on liberation for all. I thank the village of Yellow Springs for being a host as I have taken respite and for providing warmth and cover as I have learned that whether you are on the front lines, the sidelines, the back of the lines, or moving all around the lines, rest, reflection, collective healing is needed and necessary. So today's theme is completely appropriate for our times. We, collective we, those of us who believe in justice, who believe in self-determination, and who are sickened by oppression of any kind, who are watching greed and corruption with a growing concern over the type of life our children and their children will lead if we keep going in the direction we are in. For me, understanding the front lines, the sidelines, who's in the back of the line is about understanding our position in this arrangement and being able to act in the best interest of collective liberation no matter what our positionality is. In my experiences, I have learned to understand and differentiate between position and power, between moral obligation and responsibility, and to better assess where I am needed in order to be of support to create or to further a humanistic agenda. I don't believe we need to explain, folks, the divisions, the disproportionate outcomes we see in education, in healthcare, banking or real estate, the lack of respect for the land, and the preponderance of ways for us to ignore, judge, distance, and be against each other and against our mutual interests. The genocide of our people and a culture that normalizes murder and allows for these injustices to happen with the cloak of formality and institutional policy. Whether it's water in Flint, alcohol shipments to the res, police occupation in Brooklyn, homeland security on the border, the current arrangement is legal, sanctioned, and policy-driven. It thrives on targeted and unethical conflict and lives off of checking the box, fitting us into a box, checking off a label. It makes us believe that normal is acceptable and that time is on our side. Those of us on the front lines have often been anointed by the church, the institution, the community. Whether we carry titles or headings, whether we are looked at as the chosen one in our circles or pushed to the front by our elders. The front line requires us to be in an action stance, aware of the consequences, but deliberately committed to better outcomes for our communities. Together, we need to model working from a place of understanding that is rooted in reparations. What do we need to understand so we can repair the harm? What do we need to dismantle? And how do we approach creation? Healing cannot be attained if we are not willing to understand and bring light to the harm. It requires us to understand that there is no quick fix, that what was done to create these systems cannot be undone overnight, and or without multi-generational coalitions for justice who are rooted in their own experience and are able to honor those around them. Leadership development, my friends, is not about position, it's about practice. Sometimes we need to move in order to be more effective, more accessible, more connected to the true purpose. Sometimes we must hold the tensions of what an institution shows versus what our community needs. Sometimes we must say truths, even if it comes at a cost. And sometimes we must be raw instead of strategic. Our revered sister, Bell Hooks, who is now in the pantheon of the ancestors, once said, "Sometimes people try to destroy you, precisely because they recognize your power, not because they don't see it, but because they see it and they don't want it to exist." It is the necessary ingredient to keep us focused on where the line needs to go, what we're fighting for, and how we determine our next steps. Being on the front line demands that we always ask questions when making any decisions. Who does this benefit? Who does this impact? Does this bring us closer together, make us stronger? Does it uplift those most vulnerable? And if it does, show me the evidence. And if it does not, how do we fix it? It requires us to step out of what is normal and comfortable and what is politically correct. And so, as I come to a close, I want to share that as we think of our own lives, our movements, our marches, that we pay attention to those that might be considered to be in the back, whose experience needs to be in the front. I have found that inside institutions, it is those with the least amount of security, those without tenure, those that are hourly and considered help, that can speak the truths of the institution or the system. In marches and movements, I have found that those that stay oftentimes in the back are the elderly, the mothers, the physically differentiated, at times are most vulnerable. Why? Because they don't meet the status quo. The gift of the front line is its ability to withstand the winds of transformation. The gift of the sidelines and our back of the line is that they keep us honest. The artists that sing the songs and write the poems, the musicians that play the tune, the painters that describe the world. With time, with hope, with faith, our lines become circular arrangements. A wonderful circle of experience and testimony, of joy and pain, and deep, unrelenting love. Yellow Springs, Antioch College, I'm counting on you. We have to get busy. Ashe. Ashe, Antioch College and Village of Yellow Springs. I hope I have earned your opportunity and that together we may walk forward in faith and organize for justice. See you soon.
Okay, many thanks to Shadia. I regret I didn't hear the comments in advance because of the structure of the program. But I'm sure that your comments are moving, and I can't wait to hear them. This platform is a little awkward. Anyway, moving right along. Next, we will have the World House Choir, who's been involved with the Martin Luther King Day program for many years now. I met their leader, Dr. Kathy Roma, several years ago. She joined us in the Justice for John Crawford movement, and she has a choir participate in many pro-justice activities all over the area. So we're glad to have them back once again. So we'll bring to you the World House Choir.
The World House Choir will perform 7 Principles, words and music written by Dr. Bernice Johnson Regan. She wrote this introduction to the piece. The Black American holiday Kwanzaa, created during the 60s by Brother Ron Karenga, is based on 7 principles of the philosophical structure set out by Julius Nyerere as he began to move Tanzania out of its colonial past. Nyerere stated that all we need to solve our problems can be found in the traditional culture. He urged caution and selectivity, naming 2 things that should not be carried forward from the old ways: poverty and the oppression of women. Kwanzaa came at a time when Black Americans were engaged in multiple and major efforts to reconstruct broken ties and heal wounds suffered from having to struggle for survival in a society organized against our development and prosperity. 7 principles.
Umoja, unity that brings us together. Umoja, unity that brings us together. Umoja, unity that brings us together. We'll spend our money wisely. We'll spend our money wisely. We know the purpose of our lives. We know the purpose of our lives. We know the purpose of our lives. All that we touch is more beautiful. All that we touch is more beautiful. All that we touch is more beautiful.
Okay, our next poet is an elementary school student, 8 years old, Kyla Richardson. And please help me welcome Kyla. I just heard her recently speak at our Kwanzaa celebration, so I'm excited to hear her once again.
I dream a world of links and hues. I dream a world where men no other men will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor a race blights our day. A world I dream where black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free. Where wretchedness will hang its head and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world.
Okay, thank you, Kyla. So our next poet will be Vincent Baker, son of our friend Wayne Baker. And he is a high school junior, which I also had the chance to hear speak at our Kwanzaa celebration, a very articulate and committed young man. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
Today, I will be reading a speech by the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in honor of Martin Luther King Day. The speech was given on April 3rd, 1968, 4 years after the March on Washington. And in the speech, Dr. King talks about an incident that had occurred to him in 1958, in which he was stabbed and subsequently sent to the hospital. This allowed him to use this speech in 1968 as an opportunity to reflect on the fact that he was not afraid of death. More specifically, he was not intimidated by his own mortality. He conveys the message that he was satisfied with the contributions that he made to changing the world around him, changing the United States legislation, and destroying the evil Jim Crow laws. I chose this speech because really, it reflects the fact that everybody should do their part in their life, whether young or old, to change the world around them for the better, and destroy and remove laws and stipulations and just parts of society that they view as evil and corrupt. And everybody should take the opportunity to do that, regardless of the position you find yourself in life. Here is the speech. You know, several years ago, I was in New York City autographing the first book that I had written. And while sitting there autographing books, a demented black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And I was looking down writing, and I said yes. And the next minute, I felt something beating on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon, and that blade had gone through, and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. And once that's punctured, you drown in your own blood. That's the end of you. It came out in the New York Times the next morning that if I had sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me, after the operation, after my chest had been opened and the blade had been taken out, to move around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world, kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received one from the president and the vice president. I've forgotten what those telegrams said. I'd received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I've forgotten what the letter said. But there was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter, and I'll never forget it. It said simply, "Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School," she said. While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I am a white girl. I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering. And I read that if you had sneezed, you would have died. And I'm simply writing to you to say that I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze. And I want to say tonight, I want to say that I am happy that I didn't sneeze. This is from Dr. King. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960, when students all over the South started sitting in at lunch counters. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream, and taking the whole nation to those great walls of democracy which were dug deep by the Founding Fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around in 1962, when Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere. Because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been here in 1963, when the black people of Birmingham, Alabama aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Selma, Alabama, to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been in Memphis to see a community rally around those brothers and sisters who are suffering. I'm so happy that I didn't sneeze. And they were telling me, now it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us, the pilot said over the public address system. We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane. And to be sure that all of the bags were checked, and to be sure that nothing would be wrong with the plane, we had to check out everything carefully. And we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. And then I got into Memphis, and some began to say that threats, or talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, we will get to the promised land. And I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. And once again, we bring to you the fabulous World House Choir. Listen up, people.
I woke up this morning with my mind. Set on free. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind. Set on free. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind. Set on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Oh, yes. I'm walking and talking with my mom. With my mind. Set on free. I'm walking and talking with my mom. Set on free. Oh, yes. I'm walking and talking with my mom. With my mind. Set on freedom. Hallelujah. 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 Oh, you need to for justice. Come on with your mind on freedom. For peace, your honor. Come on. Come on. You need to talk. You got it. Yeah. You need to talk. With your mind on hallelujah. You need to talk. You gotta talk. You gotta talk. Oh, yes. I said it ain't no harm to keep my mind. Oh, stay on justice, yeah. Ain't no harm, y'all. Stay on free. Oh, it ain't no harm. Keep your mind. Stay on free. Yes. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
This is Kevin Magruder, treasurer of the 365 Project. We manage the finances of the Martin Luther King Day Planning Committee. And if you are interested in making a donation to support the Yellow Springs Martin Luther King Day program, you can do that in two ways. One, by going to our website, the 365projectys.org, and click on the MLK Day Fund button in the upper right-hand corner of the homepage of the website. Or you can send a check or a money order payable to the 365 Project at P.O. Box 165, Yellow Springs, Ohio, 45387. And please write MLK Day Fund in the memo line on the check or money order. Again, you can go to the website, the 365projectys.org, and click on the MLK Day Fund button in the upper right-hand corner, or you can send a check or money order payable to the 365 Project to P.O. Box 165, Yellow Springs, Ohio, 45387. Thank you.
Happy Martin Luther King Day. I'm Juliet Frumhold, Music Director at WYSO Public Radio. Dr. King once said he had, quote, a dream of equality, of opportunity, of privilege and property widely distributed in America. We here at Miami Valley Public Media share this dream and are committed to doing the work to help make it a reality here in our community. We all have a role in undoing centuries of racism and inequality in all of its forms. And at WYSO, we take that role seriously. We know that change takes all of us, from the storytellers to reporters and musicians and fundraisers. As a media organization, our news, music, and storytelling must further conversations about inequality and highlight solutions emerging to tackle it. And we want our programs, staff, boards, and volunteers to be fully reflective of the diverse communities we serve. We recognize that this work doesn't happen overnight or in a vacuum, and so our work toward diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of the day-to-day operation of every department. We're looking at how we're hiring and who we're talking to on the air, and a group of our staff gets together regularly for an anti-racism reading and discussion group. This is just the beginning of our work. On behalf of the staff of WYSO, let's all continue to work together to keep Dr. King's vision alive.
Okay, moving on through our program. It's been a long time tradition to have our young people prepare and present Peacemaker essays or essays that address the theme of our program. Last year, this was like a really rich and powerful part of our program. Was the young people are so impressive, with their writing skills. So this year, Jamie Adolph is in charge of gathering students together and having them present essays. Jamie is a language arts teacher at McKinney Middle School. And I understand we may have a couple of adult contributors as well. So here's Jamie Adolph to introduce our presenters.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Adolph, and I'm the language arts teacher at McKinney Middle School and the teacher advisor for the United Student Society at Yellow Springs High School. I would like to introduce the MLK Peacemaker Essay Award winners. This year, the prompt was do something from the sidelines to the front lines. We had entries from 5th grade all the way up through 11th grade. The winners this year were from 5th grade, Lucy Shows Fife, Corey Martin, and from the McKinney Middle School, Sylvia Pearson and Sashi Dries. And from Yellow Springs High School, we had Corinne Toddy, Merida Cooter-Wexler, Jenny Meekin, and Lydia Palm. Due to the nature of the times we live in, not everyone was able to record a video, but we do have 6 of the students' video recordings out of the 8. So please enjoy them and help in welcoming these wonderful young writers with their passionate and emotional words. Thank you very much.
Do something from the sidelines to the front lines. I want to take racism to the front lines. Racism is on the sidelines because some people don't think it exists or don't care that it exists. I think that should change. As a white person, I will never have to worry about not getting a job because of my skin color. I will never have to worry about people thinking I'm always doing something wrong because of my skin color. I will never have to worry about someone being violent to me because of my skin color. People of color have to worry about all of these actions every day. These experiences make life harder for people of color. Many white people don't think racism exists because it's not happening to them. We can't experience it, so we won't be able to notice it when it happens. We are not always aware when we are being racist ourselves. Many people believe that racism ended along with slavery and segregation, so when a person of color tells them about it, they will have a difficult time understanding their struggle. This is why racism needs to be on the front lines. The more we talk about how racism hurts people physically and mentally, the more people will understand. I am white, and I have the power to cause racism, which is why it is my job to listen to people of color. I can look inside myself and change my own behavior to help educate others. Once I have looked inside myself, I can take part in bigger movements like rallies and protests. I can contact my lawmakers to create tougher punishments for those who commit hate crimes. I no longer want to be part of the problem. I want to be a part of the resolution to end this hurtful treatment to people of color. If racism isn't stopped, our society will continue to be built on negativity and fear until the sun burns out. It will take a lot of time, a lot of willpower, and a lot of talking and listening for racism to end. But with all these small steps, we can begin to build a better future for everyone.
My name is Sylvie Pearson. This is my MLK essay, Do Something. Do something. Do something to help the world, like Martin Luther King Jr. did. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for justice, peace, and equal rights. He did this with protests, boycotts, and speeches. In the world, there are a lot of different kinds of protests. Many are for justice, peace, and equal rights. I think that the world needs to realize these problems and get involved in some way, big or small. You could post it around your town or city to spread awareness. It could be as big as a march or a boycott. Any protester needs to spread awareness to make a move. Even if you just spread awareness in schools about a small thing, it could be a big difference. Spreading awareness in small things like bullying or injustice takes great courage. You could spread awareness solo or working in a team. There are a lot you can spread awareness about. It could be for gay people, black people, injustice in the world, or injustice in your school. Any type of awareness you spread can and will make a difference. If you want to spread awareness with marching, gather neighbors, family, friends, classmates, and everyone you know to do it with you. You hold signs and march as long as you want till you feel like you've made a small difference. Sure, all the big stuff may change faster, but what about the small stuff? Like, you could ask a local newspaper to put it in the news. You could make a video to share it to the world about how to stop injustice. Or you could ask someone to do an interview with you and put it on the school news. Martin Luther King Jr. is a very big historical figure for his protests, boycotts, and speeches. Do you ever think how maybe one day you could be remembered? Maybe if you try hard enough, you could go down in history, just like Martin Luther King Jr. This is my MLK essay, Do Something.
Do something. From the sidelines to the front lines. Racism has been rooted in our society going as far back as the 1500s, and even if we were ever able to eliminate racism, it will always be a part of our history. People don't get to just forget about slavery and ignore what's right in front of them now just because it doesn't affect them the same way it may affect others. This may be too deep of a hole to dig our way back out of, but that does not mean we can't prevent further damage. People have gotten far too comfortable with racism. They've just let it be that there are people who do something about it and people who don't, and they move on. They hear about another BLM protest, they're too busy to go, or they hear some huge scene on the news, and all they have in response is, oh, that's just awful. But they don't mean anything by it. They just want to be able to move on to the next big thing. And it's not even that they don't care, it's just they don't want to have to be the one to deal with it, as it's a yucky and difficult pill to swallow, that they'd rather leave to someone else. And although people want to see change and they want us to do better, they're scared. We are all scared, one way or another. We're either too scared to step up to the plate and do something even though it matters because that means we have to step out of our boxes, or we have to be scared because of the color of our skin. We must tread carefully for our own safety or even survival. Martin Luther King was one of many activists who truly changed America. Without him, lives for many African Americans could have looked very different today. He's an important figure in our history who is well known for his great contributions to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, as well as his I Have a Dream speech of 1963. Many people celebrate and learn about King as it is important he is remembered, as he had something most of us can never find. He had courage. And he must have been terrified, so scared, knowing what he was doing could easily get him killed. And it did. But he set aside his fear, and now so many African Americans have gotten the chance to be something, to show that they mattered just as much as anyone who was white. He showed how fear isn't always an option, and it's not an option now. Not when our world is already being torn apart by so many other means, now when African American lives are being discarded left and right. And now, more than ever, there is no time for fear. No matter how afraid we are, now is the time to do something.
On the topic of advocating for myself, I've been told no a lot more recently, but that's only because I just started asking. Things to include: 1. How I feel here, like prison. 2. So much trauma and sadness, how do we even begin to mend? 3. If I was a bird, I would fly to the window, get me out of here. I'd hit the glass and fall. 4. All the teachers here who act racist, sexist, don't have boundaries. 5. The list goes on and on and on. Names, incidents, shootings. Another child dead. A 6-year-old this time. Stop teaching us how not to get assaulted and try telling people not to assault us. Might just work. If we turn our attention to the people who bring these wounds on us, we will realize that they are wounded too and deserve our empathy. Let's help the hurt, injured people instead of adding to their pain. Let's recognize our own hurt and ask for help when we need it and let people listen. Let this poem be a song, a battle cry. Let's cry for others and let their cheeks dry. The sun shines through the window and the trees wave in the breeze, this time lifted by the laughter and tears of everyone together. The bird flies through, glass shatters, free.
I want to address the elephant in the room, or in this case, in the ink, in the air, and in what people think. It's the topic that's on everyone's minds, but when brought up, it has to be disguised. They don't realize the pain it can cause. Whenever someone tries to talk about it, they put it on pause. Race. A common thing people try to deface. They say we're all the same, but they can't say it to our face. They say the topic of race is easy, but people aren't easy to replace. It's a global issue. It shouldn't be benched. It's a valuable player on both offense and defense. We stand front and center in the middle of a battle. When our race is used against us, all our bones rattle. Together as a community, we have to rise. not just as individuals, but as family, friends, and allies. No longer can we stand and look from the side, but we have to view this problem through thousands of different eyes. Though we are winning many battles, we still have to win the war. We must break free from the shackles our ancestors bore. We have to take matters into our own hands. No longer can we sit silently in the stands. We have to do something. If not now, then not ever. We have to do something so this racial pandemic will not last forever. We have to do something.
Do Something, From the Sidelines to the Front Lines by Corinne Toddy. There is an excruciatingly heavy weight on my shoulders. I've been carrying this weight from the time I was in second grade. The first time I was called a nigger by one of my white classmates. I had no idea what the meaning of that word was then, but I sure do know now. From that point on, as I have navigated my way through my education at a predominantly white institution, which has added even more weight on my shoulders. This weight appears as microaggressions by white friends using the N-word, white people touching my hair without permission, being gaslit by my classmates, being singled out by white teachers, being bullied for wearing cultural hairstyles, or dealing with racism from the white side of my family. The weight I carry from these experiences is heavy. When I remember these experiences, I get angry. All of the emotions I experienced in those moments rise to the surface. I want to scream and yell, but then I am seen as the angry Black woman. I want to cry and break down, but then I do not uphold the stereotype of the strong Black woman. Sometimes I feel like I can't handle anymore, but then I remember the people who fought for us to get to where we are now. I think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Ruby Bridges, Rosa Parks, and so many other activists. I wonder how they handled the experiences they went through so very graciously. My heart aches for the little Black girl inside who wanted to feel beautiful in her own skin. My heart aches for the little Black girl who wanted to wear her hair naturally the way it comes out of her head without fear of getting bullied. I want to hug that little Black girl and tell her that she doesn't need to straighten her hair to be considered beautiful by the white kids. I want to tell her to be unapologetically herself and embrace her culture in any way possible. I want to tell that little girl that one day she will believe all those things about herself even if she can't see it now. I want to tell that little shy Black girl that one day she will find her voice. She won't be afraid to speak out against racism in fear of losing her so-called friends. I want to tell that little Black girl that despite how hard it might be, that she will one day be able to tell her white family how much they have hurt her by all of the microaggressions and insensitive comments. I want to tell that little Black girl that she will no longer keep everything bottled up inside, but instead stand up and do something for herself and her community. I want to tell that little Black girl that she is loved no matter her skin complexion, hair type, or facial features that were once deemed ugly by white people.
Okay, moving on through our program. Next up, we have an offering from one of our esteemed seniors. Please listen to Suzanne Patterson.
My name is Suzanne Patterson, and I'm 82 years old. Martin Luther King Jr. celebrates his extraordinary heart, mind, and leadership. King is an American Gandhi, a giant in social justice. Celebrate his courage and uncommon sense. He still leads us.
Okay, a few years ago, we began a tradition of presenting the Community Peacemaker Award, which is designed to recognize someone in the community who has made a commitment to the service of people in the community. And we're doing it again this year, of course. And making that award presentation will be our leader and president, Mrs. Linda Cox. So please welcome Miss Linda Cox.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Cox, and I am the chair for the Martin Luther King Planning Committee. This year, our committee is honored to present the Peacemaker Award to Karen McKee. We believe that she not only epitomized the spirit of this award, but also her legacy will endure for years to come. The biography of Karen McKee reads as follows. Karen McKee, born and raised in Yellow Springs, is a sixth-generation descendant of the Conway colony that settled in Yellow Springs in July 1862. A proud product of the schools here, she graduated from Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, and then relocated to the Washington, D.C. area, where she received her master's in educational, administrative, and supervision from the Antioch Graduate School of Education. She spent her professional career in the D.C. area, first as an educator in the D.C. public school system, and then joined the National Association of Education, now the Department of Education, to conduct research into the efficacy of Title I compensatory education programs for at-risk youth. She then transitioned into case management, working with the Fairfax Falls Church Community Service Board as a substance abuse counselor. Karen retired in 2012 and returned to Yellow Springs. After retiring from the DC area in 2012 and returning home, she launched her second career, that of an active, dedicated, and committed community volunteer for the village of Yellow Springs. Her extensive involvements included president of the James A. McKee Association, a charitable, educational, and scientific organization aimed at encouraging volunteerism to help build and strengthen the Yellow Springs community. Founded by her father, former chief of police and civic leader Jim McKee. Through that organization, she supported such programs or initiatives as Candidates Night, a biennial, nonpartisan, and balanced forum to present community candidates for locally elected offices. The James A. McKee Scholarship Fund, an educational leadership award given annually to one or more students exhibiting qualities exemplified by Jim, including diplomacy, leadership, intelligence, community involvement, and academic achievement, as well as other programs such as Community Conversations and the annual James A. McKee Foundation Award. Aside from her leadership role in James A. McKee Association, Karen was also a member of the editorial committee for the 365 Project's recently published Blacks in Yellow Springs Encyclopedia, as well as a member of the planning committee for the Will and God Sculpture Project with the Yellow Springs Art Council, a member of the development committee of the Yellow Springs Senior Center, and a devoted member of St. Paul's Catholic Church, where she was a sacrosanct and a member of the St. Paul's Parish Council. Parishioners there valued her as someone who was always available when volunteers were needed, always stepping up to help out without ever being asked, always being willing and ready to lend a hand, and always welcoming new and old parishioners alike to St. Paul. Among her most recent projects were working on Courageous Conversation and the Next Step Initiative, as well as the Committee for the Reverend Matthews Memorial Plaque. Following completion of the Matthews Plaque, the appreciative family had this to say, quote, Karen's love for the heritage of Yellow Springs was demonstrated in her untiring efforts to honor the individuals and their history in making sure their contributions and foundation building are remembered, honored, and kept alive. Karen spent hours researching and bringing to life the acts of unselfishness wrapped of YS founders with love and the utmost respect for Yellow Springs. These pioneers were brought to life and remembered as a result of Karen's love for Yellow Springs. We were blessed to have Karen there to document Wesley Matthews with a day of honor with a forever plaque. We know Dad is looking down with Jimmy McKee at his side and the other founders of YS, beaming with much love and pride for Karen keeping their labor of love strong and alive. Well done, faithful servant, unquote. And now I'd like to read to you the plaque that the MLK Planning Committee will present to Karen's family on behalf of Karen. 2022 Community Peacemaker Award presented to Karen McKee for outstanding dedication to community service by the Yellow Springs Martin Luther King Jr. Planning Committee. Thank you.
On behalf of the McKee family, my sister Jean McKee, my sister Sandy McKee Smith, and myself, Barry McKee Timor, I want to thank you for honoring our beloved sister Karen for this year's Peacemaker Award. Karen was only back in Yellow Springs less than a decade, but what a footprint she left in that short period of time. She was a tireless, committed volunteer to the Yellow Springs community. In a recent editorial, the Yellow Springs News celebrated Karen as, quote, an economy of grace, unquote. The beautifully written editorial talks about the fact that Karen embodied this notion of grace naturally. The editorial also speaks to the fact that Karen never asked for or accepted accolades for the contributions she made, whether they were to her family, her friends, her church, or her community. When I was approached to write a biographical sketch for Karen for this award, I called Karen on the phone. She was in the hospital at the time, to ask her if she could give me some background information about all the different things she'd been working on and the things that she'd accomplished. And in her vernacular, she said, "Barry, it ain't that deep. It ain't that deep." And she said further that simply, if anything, I want people to know that what I worked hard to do was to continue our family legacy of community service. She actually accomplished that eloquently and beautifully in the short period of time that she was back in Yellow Springs. Rather than speak for herself, she presented me with the directions of, she directed me to a number of people with whom she had worked over the years to gather some of the information that I would need for the writing. To a person, everyone I spoke with captured her energy, her commitment, and love for the Yellow Springs community. And on behalf of the McKee family, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for seeing Karen for the jewel that she was and celebrating her life. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. That was very moving. So here I am live to kind of wrap things up. And I'm sitting here, I'm just kind of overwhelmed really with the presentations. Thank you, Karen. You will really be missed. Somebody go wrap their arms around Corinne Toddy. That was just a wonderful presentation. I'm really moved by once again, by the youth essays, the articulation and sensibility of our young people. You know, it just continues to overwhelm me. And I regret we're not able to gather in person so we could wrap our arms around our young people in particular. Special thanks to Shadia for your powerful words, and all the participants. Special thanks to David Atkins from Antioch College, who did such a great job of editing the video and even adding the captions. You know, that was like a real fine touch. Thanks, David. Thanks to Jamie Adolph for getting those essays from the young people. Special shout out to WYSO for your participation and support in our program. And some of you noticed in the chat that I gave Kyla's name wrong. Kyla, the first youth poet, is actually Kyla Randolph, not Richardson. And I'm going to say that, don't blame me, that's not my fault. I just shared what was given, but people were quick to jump in and correct it. So thank you, Kyla. And please accept our apologies for getting your name wrong, but we definitely got it right now. Yeah, once again, special thanks to all the participants. To those of you who showed up for the march and bared the cold and snow this morning, much appreciated. We had a really fine turnout. Thank you for our contributors, the First Baptist Church, the Village of Yellow Springs, Human Relations Commission, the Yellow Springs Havara, the Yellow Springs Community Foundation, and many other generous donors. Thanks to the World House Choir and finally, thanks to the Yellow Springs Martin Luther King Day Planning Committee, which consists of our leader, Linda Cox, Alyssa Isaac, the ubiquitous Kevin Magruder, my brother from another mother, Reverend William Randolph, Deacon Paul Richardson, and last but not least, I'm also on that committee. Once again, thanks everyone who participated in putting together this and participating in this such a great program today. I'm really moved, I'm impassioned, I'm re-energized, I'm mad because we couldn't gather in person. So let's get together and wrestle this pandemic to the dirt. And I'm through editorializing now, I guess. And now we will wrap up with a final selection from the World House Choir. Have a great day, everyone.
Much has changed in the decades since Dr. King's death. Although it seems at times that too much has stayed the same. It has been said that as long as he is seen chiefly as a hero for African Americans, the breadth and magnitude of his contributions will have been missed. For he came to set us all free from the suffocating effects of bigotry and intolerance. America would have little basis for exerting moral leadership in the world if it had not come so far toward the eradication of its own brand of apartheid at home. Still, many battles are yet unwon. In the war, Dr. King died fighting. Wherever the struggle for justice, equality, and dignity continues to be waged without recourse to bullets and bombs, his light still shines. And those today who take up the challenge of overcoming hatred with love are responding, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. did, to the clarion call of the old spiritual that said, "Hold up your light, you heaven-bound soldiers, hold out your light and let your light shine around the world."
Hold out your light, yes, you heaven-bound soldier. Hold out your light, you heaven-bound soldier. Hold out your light, yes, you heaven-bound soldier. Let your light shine around the world. Hear the children singing. Hold out your light, yes, you heaven-bound soldier. Hold out your light, you heaven-bound soldier. Hold out your light, yes, you heaven-bound soldier. Let your light shine around the world. Singing, oh, raise your hands, you hold out your light. Oh, deacon, can't you hold out your light? Oh, leader, can't you hold out your light? Let your light shine around the world. Hear the children singing. Oh, preacher, can't you hold